Hello again, 201. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the environmental, population, and cultural characteristics of Chapter 8, Europe, and the environmental geography with air pollution and acid rain. That's not so bad today because a lot of the industry is gone. Germany is still heavily industrialized, but other parts have declined significantly. And they were serious environmental problems a generation ago, from centuries of agriculture, industrialization, and urbanization. Pollution knows no boundaries. Many of these countries are like states in the United States. They're that close together. Air pollution in England will create acid rain in Sweden. Water pollution in Switzerland creates poor quality drinking water in the Netherlands. And those are three main issues that are going on. No boundaries with these types of environmental problems. But since the EU came in the late 1970s, in matters of recycling, waste management, reduced energy usage, and sustainable resource use, the EU has made Western Europe the greenest of the major world regions. Eastern Europe still has a lot of pollution problems because of the communist era economic planning, and 33% of Poland's population has some kind of serious respiratory problem or cancer. And that's the fallout from the Chernobyl accident in the Ukraine. The future is improving as more countries enter the EU and its required policies. Again, these are areas where they are very, very successful in becoming green. Some of the physical environment, there's a really excellent mix of topographical categories in Europe. With the Alpine mountains, the Alps are some of the highest in the world. The European lowlands in Western Europe, where the Netherlands are engaging in land reclamation. They are making their country bigger by draining some of these lowlands and stabilizing them and turning them into huge tulip area farms. The central uplands in France and Germany have all kinds of raw materials that they are still extracting today. And then there's the western highlands from Portugal to Britain. The climate there is milder than it is in the United States because of the North Atlantic current. Unfortunately, their summers are not very good. They tend to be wet and cooler. And Europe is considered to be a maritime region. There's a large number of navigable rivers and canals that give most countries access to the sea. This is one of the explanations for the age of exploration by Europeans. As their ships improved and as their navigation tools improved, they were readily out into the seas and into the ocean. And this is a picture of the Danube from the forests in southern Germany all the way into the Black Sea, and in the Danube delta of Romania and Ukraine in this region here. The fjords of Scandinavia are flooded valleys originally carved out by glaciers, and Norway has many fjords. So those are some interesting topographical features of the region. The population is marked historically since World War II by very low birth rates. And because of that, this is an attractive place for migrants looking for replacement labor because it's an aging population there, as is Japan, as we'll see in East Asia. There are many guest workers, job seekers from former colonies. We talked about some of that in previous videos. And there's war refugees coming out of Southwest Asia from the former Iraq, from Kurdistan, which is, we mentioned that that was the largest ethnic group without a country in the world, and Turks attempt to come into Europe to work as well, mainly in Germany, because Germany has a very, very strong economy, and they have zero growth rates. And in these particular countries, the government is attempting to incentivize birth with cash rewards again, and with generous maternity leave. In total, Germany has the largest population, and Monaco, which still has a king and queen, has the highest population density, even though it is a very small country, surrounded by Luxembourg and Switzerland is right nearby as well, and Italy. The historic change, we've seen this before, accounts for low birth rates. As you move from agricultural to industrial to even post-industrial societies, families do not need and probably can't afford multiple births. And as a result, they've been below replacement. But with the migrants who have come in, that has now made the demographic into a very slow natural growth, because these individuals are having babies. And the collapse of the Soviet Union also spurred migration out of what was Western Russia into other areas in the world. The last topic in this region is the culture. And there are fascinating different languages spoken in Europe, and there is a lot of religious diversity because of the forces of world history. Make no mistake, European cultures have played leading roles in the process of globalization, which is one of the themes of this course. Changing speech, religion, belief systems, dress, and habits of millions of people for better and worse on every continent. Europe today resists the global popular culture that tends to be dominated by the United States, but it also attempts the integration of the continent through the European Union. And the EU is hanging on right now in the 21st century, even though Britain would like to withdraw from it once again and not use the euro, the common currency that has been issued in the last 25 years. The geographies of language are very fascinating. 90% of the population speaks one of these language groups: Germanic, Romance, or Slavic, and all belong to the Indo-European family. The Germanic languages dominate north of the Alps in these particular countries. 90 million speak German as a first language. And there are more of these charts and graphics in the textbook if you're interested in more further knowledge on this. English is the second largest group. Dutch is spoken in the Netherlands, Flemish in Belgium. The Romance languages is another interesting historical topic. They evolved from the Vulgar Latin, also known as the vernacular. And vernacular languages like Italian, French, Castilian, Spanish, and so on were popularized by Gutenberg's printing press. And Castilian Spanish is one dialect, and Catalan is another, and sometimes this culture believes it is separate from the rest of Spain. And there is also another group in the mountains of Spain that sometimes the Basque region also would like to see. They're periodically talking about seceding from the rest of Spain. Portuguese we've talked about before with Brazil. In Portugal, there's 12 million speakers, and there's far more than that in Brazil. Unbelievably, it was its former colony. And Romanian is the farthest east of the Romance languages, and that's spoken by 24 million people. The other large group is the Slavic language. It's a subgroup of the Indo-European family. And if Russia is included, this is a huge group. Here are some of the other Slavic languages. Russia historically believed themselves to be the protectors of these different groups during the Romanov dynasty. And you see these numbers. And there's two different alphabets, which will lead into the religious differences. The Latin, followed by the Roman Catholic Church, and the Cyrillic, followed by the Greek Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox Christian Church. And here are some other minor languages: Celtic, Scots Gaelic, Welsh, Irish, Hellenic. Lettish is spoken in Latvia and parts of Lithuania, the Baltic states. Magyar in Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. And in North Serbia, there is the language of the Gypsies. Estonians speak this particular language. I'm not familiar with that at all. Or with Lapps. Altaic language group includes Turkish. And there's Turkish speakers still in Bulgaria because of the age of Muslim empires. And I mentioned the Basques earlier. And they're believed to be descendants of prehistoric Europeans in that mountainous region of the Pyrenees. And again, there's been periodic terrorist acts against Madrid. Many of today's cultural tensions are embedded in historical events, such as the split between Christianity into the Western and Eastern churches. More on that in World Civ I. Christianity was legalized by Constantine, and that's the Eastern Roman Empire of the time, and it spread further north and east by hierarchical diffusion. Usually you took your tribal leader's religion, and later local peoples converted to the Lord's religion. Very important during the Reformation. Are you Catholic or are you Protestant? And they fought about that. The official split came in 1054 between the Roman Church and the Greek Orthodox Church, centered in Byzantium, which is today Istanbul, formerly known as Constantinople. And again, we mentioned the difference in their alphabets. There was the Protestant revolt in the 1500s, the 30 Years' War, where Catholics and Protestants fought over faith because of some of the practices of the Catholic Church. Martin Luther objected to these practices as being non-Bible based, but based on tradition of the Pope and the bishops and the rest of the clergy of the church. The plague was also a problem in other parts of Europe during the 14th century, and almost 50% of the population died off in the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries in Europe. Conflicts with Islam, more on that in World Civ. Basically, ethnic boundaries are drawn based on religion. The further north you go in Europe, the more Protestant it is. The farther south, the more Eastern Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or Roman Catholic as you go towards Western Europe. The Moors, or the Muslim influence, was big in Spain. And these boundaries were redrawn many times in the war-torn 20th century. Irredentism is an interesting geographic term. Kaliningrad is still part of Russia, but it's surrounded by Poland and Lithuania. It's still there. The Soviet Union controlled all of this at one time until the very early 1990s. Finally, there is the geography of Judaism. There was a dispersal from Palestine during the Roman Empire, and by 900, 20% of the Jewish population lived in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, which was ironically controlled by the Muslims. But after the reconquest by the Catholic Church, the Inquisition came in, and they were persecuted by the Inquisition. So they fled to Central and Eastern Europe, and they settled in what came to be called the Jewish Palais, and there is a map of this in the textbook. And 90% of the Jewish population lived there until the 1890s, when many began to immigrate to America. And in 1939, there was 9.5 million Jews there until the Holocaust committed on the Jewish people by the Nazis. There's fewer than 2 million in Europe today, but ironies of ironies, Germany has the fastest growing immigration of Jewish people today, mostly from the former Soviet Union. Here are your figures of Roman Catholics and Protestants, but generally speaking, secularization has been used to describe Europe today, the movement away from organized religion. And there is also a greater number of Muslims today. They are the guest workers, or the migrant labor that has come in to fill the labor gap because of the non-replacement birth rate. Historically, there were problems between Protestants and Catholics in Northern Ireland, and that's been very peaceful in this century. In the 70s and 80s, this was erupting all the time. Ulster wanted to keep the ties with the UK, whereas the Republic wanted to have Eire, or the Northern Ireland, come back into the Republic of Ireland. And this has been calm. Poland does not follow the secularization trend. Poland is not a secular country, and Hungary, Slovakia, and half of the Czech Republic are still very, very strong Catholic countries. And that concludes the first 3 topics of Chapter 8, Europe.